Foreign Ag Service with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But more importantly, I grew up on a farm. I've worked with farmers and agriculture around the world all my life. And I think this is an incredibly important panel, and I'm very pleased to be able to be here. I want to start by just thanking the organizers for the AGRF for the opportunity to host this. I want to thank the organizers of the side session, the Commission on Sustainable Agriculture Intensification, Gates Ag 1, the International Fund for Ag Development, as well as USAID, and of course USDA. So, thank you all for joining us. I think we've got a fantastic panel here. I was looking along at the participants, and one of the things that I noticed that really jumped out at me as a common theme is innovation. And that's something that I think is incredibly important for agriculture right now. As I mentioned, I've been in ag all my life. I grew up on a farm in Texas. I've been a Foreign Service officer for 30 years, served in many different countries. And one of the things I've learned is that farmers are the same all over the world. They all complain about the same three things: the weather, the prices, and the government. There's other things they have in common, and that's they want to produce a good product, they want to take care of their land, and they want to feed their families. And I think that's particularly true for the smallholders. Now, some of you may wonder, well, what does USDA, how are they involved in this? USDA represents the biggest country in the world, the biggest ag producer, some of the biggest farmers. Well, at USDA, there's a lot of people like me that grew up on farms. We understand agriculture, we have a connection to agriculture, and we really care about farms. We also have seen what's happened over the last several years. There's climate change, there's the droughts, there's the issue with the food security issues arising from Ukraine. And we really understand at USDA that everything is all interconnected. We also know that we're creeping up on 8 billion people. Climate change is affecting our ability to produce. And it's incredibly important that we all work together to produce more food more sustainably. The other aspect is that in agriculture and USDA, we understand how important the smallholder is to the overall economy. If you don't have a stable small producers, then you don't have the base that you need to make sure that you can produce and take care of the economy and the ag for the future. So there's several things that we like to look at for smallholders. One of the things I've been involved in these type of issues in many different areas, and it's easy to do things for the big companies. It's easy to set up an agreement with the government. It's hard to take the time to sit and work with the small farmers, with the scaleholders, because they're the ones that often need the most work and need individual treatment. And that's one thing that I think this group does, is they found ways to scale the need to what the farmer is looking for. If they don't have the income to purchase the new seeds, or they don't have the education in order to use the new technology, you have to move down and adapt the technology to what they can use. You also have to educate them so that they can understand what the opportunities are. The other side is making sure that you provide a strong support group, organization for them. A lot of that is based on the government, but there needs to be science-based decisions, there needs to be open markets, and the farmers need to understand what they're producing for. They need to understand the demand that the consumers present so that they can meet that demand. There's a lot that needs done out there, but I'm very optimistic. There's a lot going on here in Africa that I'm very excited about. There's the African Union and all of their work. We're very happy to work with them trying to establish SPS guidelines. There's the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. There's the EAC. There's a lot of organizations that are doing fantastic work that really gives me a lot of hope for the future. what I want to do here is challenge our panelists and the audience to really think about how do we take all of those good things that are going on, how do we translate that to the smallholders so that we can look forward. The two areas that I see the best options are, one is education, making sure that we're educating the smallholders so that they know how to do things better, so that they know what's possible. Farmers are smart. They may not be book smart, but they certainly know their land, they know what they can do, and they're looking for opportunity. The other thing is to make sure that there's opportunities for them to actually succeed. They need access to markets. Often that means that you're expanding trade among countries. They need to know that their product, when they produce it, it will be accepted. So that means SPS organizations. And it also means that there's regulations that they can follow. So those, to me, are the challenges that we're here to meet. We have a fantastic panel. I'm looking forward to hearing from them. And I've got, there we go. I'd like to introduce the moderator today, Mr. James Muyoneza. He's with the New Times in Rwanda. He's the managing editor there. The New Times is Rwanda's largest private English language news and media organization, and he's been there for over 20 years, so he has a lot of experience in this type of program, in what's going on in this area, and I think he'll do a fantastic job with the program. So with that, I'll turn it over to James. So thank you very much.
I want to invite our panelists. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Claire. I want to invite all of our panelists here. I want to invite all of you participants. And we're looking forward to a very interactive session with each one here. So going forward, we'll basically give a few minutes to each of our panelists. We'll be introducing them, and then they'll delve into a little bit details of what basically they do in this context of innovation in particular Africa, and then interact with them very briefly, and then after we'll have a few minutes, 15 minutes of question and answer session, and then we'll have closing remarks. And I'll ask our panelists to basically go straight to the point, but also when the time for questions comes, please be straight to the point, and do maybe would appreciate if you could direct your question to a particular panelist or some panelists, just in case. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mr. Dipara Ekwamu, who is the Executive Secretary of Forum, and that's in the space of research for universities. Mr. Ekwamu, you're welcome. If you could briefly tell us, please, what do you do? What does this forum do in this space of innovation and the research that you do in this context? Thank you.
Thank you, our moderator. As you mentioned, my name is Adipale Kwamu. I'm the Executive Secretary or the CEO of the Regional Universities Forum for Capacity Building in Agriculture. We are a network of 157 universities working across Africa. And it was founded for two main reasons. One, to support human capital development for enhancing the participation of African universities to contribute to the comprehensive African agricultural development program. In other words, the network works that would like to develop, train a new generation of scientists and practitioners to go and support agricultural transformation. That is basically what we do. The second thing is that we work with universities to try to generate technologies and innovations. And to do that, we work not only universities alone, we try to engage other actors along the agricultural value chains. The third thing that we engaged in is policy advocacy for agricultural development in Africa. This means engaging with policymakers and others. Our weakness from the university perspective was that we came from a paradigm where universities were seen as ivory towers. We were working within our university premises. We were not linked to those who were supposed to support and transform. So the core function of Forum has been to try to strengthen university community development, to strengthen agricultural value chains. But doing so in such a way that we try as much as possible to derive some of the actions from the communities we are to support. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Kwam. So in terms of policy advocacy, what are some of the main achievements have you made in that area to try to make the life of smallholders really easier in terms of policy? So because there's a disconnect. Some people will say there's this disconnect that has continued to manifest.
I think first, our policy intervention was really from the way university do business. Getting the university to buy that our responsibility doesn't remain within the university campus. And it's not simply about churning students, but you are training those students for what purpose. I think getting that buy-in from the university leaders and making them an integrated part for universities to start creating outreach programs to get universities, getting students attached to the rural communities, and also making faculty that they become part of the change process. And here I must say we built a lot of experiences from the American public and land grant universities, how they do business. This has been something that we have been championing. The other thing was that we try to engage at African Union level. Two things. Yes, our immediate task is to transform the agriculture, but you will need the hands to transform the agriculture. Those hands involve a multi-stakeholders. It requires you policymakers to put the policy framework, so influencing that direction, what do we need to do at policy level? Two, you people who do the training, you also need to implement certain policies. And then three, what is the recruitment process in the universities? And then coming down, what policies do you have in the universities that promote especially addressing the issue of inclusivity in our undertakings? And this has been a key thing that we have been doing, recruiting female students, trying to go and work with not only the diverse farmer groups, getting that as a platform. And equally important is to making sure that we are fitting within the continental frameworks, within the policy framework programs that are set by our partners like the FARA, Forum for Agricultural Research Organization, the program of the sub-regional organization, so that we develop a coalition of partners in the implementation process. And I think the buy-in to operate as a coalition is something that Forum prides itself, that I think we are beginning to work as a diverse group of stakeholders, rather than saying, I know the answers.
Mr. Ekwam, coming from Rwanda, I'm from Rwanda, and I was wondering if you ask an ordinary, average Rwandan smallholder about Forum and how they can engage with you, and how what you do in terms of research can inform what is being done at the grassroots, in terms of irrigation, in terms of post-harvest, harvest handling and all. Would you say you've really reached these grassroots stakeholders yet, or it's always work in progress, but would you say this Rwandan farmer would say, yes, I identify myself with what Forum is doing?
In terms of Rwanda, one of the key contributions for Forum in Rwanda was really after the genocide and the recovery period, Rwanda needed to rebuild its education system. And for that, it went to the association, the ASERECA Association for Strengthening Agricultural Research in Africa. And ASERECA said, but in terms of human capital, that is not our mandate. Bring in a reform.
All right.
So we have a pool of Rwandan scientists that we have trained, and they're the one, money, supporting the innovation platform, the dairy, the horticulture, and whatnot. So they are on the ground. Reform operates through its products, the graduates, the alumni, and some of those alumni are championing the change. We are honored. We are being hosted here by the president of AGRA. That's a product that came through that service. You have Solange spearheading the RAB. Those are the products.
Thank you so much.
Championing dairy value chain. Those are the products of Reform.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ikwamo. Very important contribution. Next is Josephine Okoti, and Josephine is the founder and managing director of Victoria Seeds Limited and vice chair of International Fertilizer Development Center. Josephine, very briefly, please take us through, especially in the current context, what we are seeing globally with farmers faced with soaring prices, fertilizer, and other inputs they would like really to have to apply to have good harvest. How are you reinventing yourself in the current global realities?
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, delegates. Thanks for joining our panel. James, it's always exciting to share my story of a startup, a seed company startup. And originally, our mandate was to improve the yields of farmers, get quality seeds into their hands with crop protection products so that they can improve their yield. But as we speak now, that mandate has changed. Actually, we say, as a seed company, our business is to help Uganda be food secure. That shows that the challenge is no longer just about one individual, but it's either a national challenge or a global challenge. But I'm proud that we have a success record because as I speak, we have Victoria Seeds Rwanda in Kirehe, but it's a startup. But the fact that we were able to get that brand from Uganda to Rwanda, to me, is a success. So originally, when we had just started, it was about getting quality seeds or hybrid maize into the hands of farmers and getting crop protection products. But now you just can't do that. Why do I say you can't do that? Now we need to focus on drought tolerance. And it's not just drought. We have had, you are aware, invasive pests, and for us in Uganda, the past season, the African armyworm, and then as if that is not bad enough, the price of fertilizers doubled, and you just can't say you are delivering seed and expect to get output. So it means you need partnership with government and partnerships with development partners, and you cannot do it on your own. You need to get seed, but you need to ensure that the soil nutrition is addressed, and also other issues of crop insurance is catered to handle the pests and diseases. But then I would like to mention one which is a plus and also a negative. Government has come in with a lot of subsidy. I think it's not only Uganda. That subsidy is great as a business. It drives demand, and maize is our cash cow. And if you ask any seed company in Uganda, at least 60 to 70% of their sales is to government. But if I, as Victoria Seeds, I sign a framework contract for 4 years for certain varieties, what motivation do I have to innovate? So that subsidy is a plus, but it's a negative, it has a negative impact on innovation. So now when you drive along Uganda, like 10 years ago, you'd see a lot of variety demonstrations of seed companies. It has all disappeared because there is no motivation to innovate. So it's like a double-edged sword, and that is something that I see as a challenge. And before I summarize, there is a cloud that hangs over us, James, the cost of finance. I'm not talking about access, the cost of finance. I've been speaking for 17 years, but sometimes I feel like I'm the only fool who keeps on speaking about it, because the cost affects many of the things that we are not able to do. And getting innovation is an investment. It needs money. It also means I cannot get quality human capital. So human capital is a very big challenge for the seed industry in Uganda, not just Victoria Seeds. When I started, you get these smart scientists, you get a breeder, but before you know it, FAO has taken them. Before you know it, Danida has picked them. We can't compete. And unless, as long as I'm borrowing at that crazy, ludicrous rate of 20%, most of your money goes to the bank. Post-COVID, I think governments have tried. They said it has come down. It's still hanging around 16%, which to me is very high. For agribusiness, it should be under 3%. So with that kind of financing where you are paying a commercial bank, you can't get quality human capital, and it works negatively on getting good innovation.
Thank you so much, Josephine. So there's this cycle of issues that keep coming up. Do you think we have enough political will across the board, not only in Uganda, but across the region and at the continental level? Do we have enough political will to really transform agriculture, given that it's a sector that not just feeds us all, but also employs over 70% of our people? And what would be the way forward? Very briefly in a second or two.
Yeah, the way forward, I think I would say the political will is there, but I always say, James, there is a mismatch. You know, when I go to a credit manager, this is the smart banker who is very well qualified, but sometimes he has never even seen, let's say, a crop like millet or a crop like a tomato, the challenge the farmers go through. So what the African government should do is pick the ones that Dr. Dipala has trained, or even the extension officer, take them to a banking school for 2 years, and once they sit and they evaluate me, this one understands that the fall armyworm isn't the end of the world. So you can still lend. They understand that crops this is the season. They understand the cycle. So as long as we continue to have credit managers, for lack of a better word, who sits in an ivory tower. I know some banks have gone the extra mile. I'm proud to mention, like Equity Bank, Centenary Bank in Uganda, they go down to the grassroots. But 99% of them, they do not understand our business. So because of that, they see us very risky. I'm telling you, when we try to innovate, like Victoria Seeds, we want to go into fish feed production. They don't have a clue. They do not know that what it takes to get the fish ponds and to know that this is the investment the farmer needs. It's the fisheries officer who should be my bank credit manager. So the day we address that, I think it will be a major, major milestone. So if you could use this forum to lobby, I think many of the challenges would be eliminated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josephine. So ivory towers at universities, ivory towers still also in banks. I want to take this opportunity now to invite Joe Cornelius. Joe is the CEO, Bill and Melinda Gates Agricultural Innovations. That's the Gates AG1. Josephine, and indeed also Dipara did raise the issue of the ivory towers and issues of disconnect across the board. So you will talk to us about, your interventions, your own findings, and maybe address these issues of mismatch and how best they can be addressed. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James. Is this on? Okay. And thank you to AGRF for actually inviting Gates Ag 1 to be here today. We're the new kids on the block and really do appreciate the warm welcome we've had being here with this distinguished panel and the rest of the forum audience. From a background standpoint, touching on the ivory tower question for a moment. I'm a farmer by birth, I'm a scientist by training, and I'm Sicilian by marriage. And you can guess which of those three dominates. But seriously, talking about innovation in this space, it's a very complex challenge for all of us, and everyone in this room is obviously a champion of addressing the innovation bottlenecks that we are addressed with. One of the things from a background standpoint, when the foundation was considering actually looking at its process of product development, we did an analysis of looking at the innovation process, and actually were able to articulate 13 failure modes in the agricultural sector's crop innovation platform. And those failure points are not unique for any particular geography. Actually, it's an artifact of science. It's a very risky venture to actually be able to move technology from the research lab through the different development stages, and then ultimately deliver that to smallholder farmers. And one of the failure points that actually I think was most important for me, actually, after looking at the study, the number one failure point was lack of a well-articulated product concept. That means that the innovation pipeline basically was missing the opportunity to actually understand exactly what the farmer needs, and ensuring that throughout the development process that they were building a fit-for-purpose product. And that's, as we look at, many of you in this room are actually dedicating yourselves to actually be able to advance those technologies and deliver something that actually will accelerate the pipeline and ensure that we're delivering impact for the farmers. So I'm not sure if I've got everything covered there, James, but.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to still unpack. I think you did state broadly, but then for people like Josephine, who are frustrated with the red tape, with the disconnect between different players, with people who don't understand why they should really invest in this high-risk sector, and with the reluctance of decision makers and the policy makers. So how do you come in to help people like Josephine to really be able to get things going, ultimately, of course, benefiting the smallholders? Is there just a space you really are involved with, and how do you, from a more practical, basic level, really, how do you do it? Yeah.
So Josephine's absolutely right in the context that from an innovation standpoint, the pipeline's broken. And there's a number of aspects as we look at that pipeline where we are actually letting the farmer down, and we're actually exhausting resources in order to actually be able to create and build transformative products in this space. And actually the very first step is about, as we think about guiding principles, is to actually create the collaborations that actually enable us to have the insight to understand what the market needs, and to create collaborations that can actually deliver the products that are designed and fit for purpose in that space.
Thank you so much, Joel. I want to now invite Elizabeth Simadala. Elizabeth is the president of Eastern Africa Farmers Federation and board member of World Farmers Organization. So Elizabeth, we are excited to have you on the panel with us. As a farmer, such discussions, how best can we steer them towards practical solutions? And from your experience, what are some of the frustrations that you're having to endure, and what have been the proposals you brought to the table for the way forward? So I know it's a lot, but I know you can also unpack because you have the hands-on experience in this field. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James, and good afternoon, everyone. As already introduced, my name is Elizabeth Nsimadara. I'm a Ugandan smallholder farmer and agripreneur, the president of the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, the director Women Affairs at the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization, and an Africa representative on the board of the World Farmers Organization. But for purposes of this meeting, I will focus on the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, which is a regional organization with a footprint in the 10 Eastern Africa countries, with a membership of 25 national level farmers organizations and representing voices of over 25 million smallholder farmers. So I would like to, first of all, appreciate AGRF and its partners for inviting farmers to share our experience with this honorable audience. If I may start with our strategic focus as a farmers organization is to harness smallholder farmers as rewarding investment opportunities. And how do we do this? We are looking at a number of ways on how we can look at ourselves as investment opportunities by putting everything to scale, whatever Josephine and colleagues have been talking about. First of all, recognizing that African agriculture is subsistence in nature. So you can't do much if you're to support farmers individually. So we are looking at the concept of aggregation, working through farmers' cooperatives, associations, and farmer companies, and making sure that we put that to scale. Looking at innovation and digitization. There's a lot of innovation that is happening out there. But some of these innovations die before they can even celebrate their second birthdays. So as a farmer organization, we are looking at how we can put some of these innovations to scale, and especially looking at the farmer-led innovations. Because I know as a continent, we have really, I would say, significantly failed to harness some of these innovations, especially those that are farmer-led or those that have been developed by other actors like women and youth. We usually think it's only researchers that can innovate. And so most of these innovations have not been well packaged to attract investments from some of these development partners like the Bill and Melinda Gates. So how do we make sure that we package or we support farmers and farmers organizations to put to scale some of these innovations, to strengthen their internal capacity to be able to offer member-based services on a sustainable basis. And beyond that, to also look at other cross-cutting issues that we face, issues to do with resilience. For example, how do we make sure that as farmers organizations we become more resilient? How do we make sure that we have targeted programs for youth, for women? How do you look at and handle issues of climate change? I think there are so many issues and so many challenges that we face as farmers. But maybe I would like to take you to the critical issues that, of course, we face across the entire value chain, which is mainly in terms of services, access to services, the improved seeds that Josephine was talking about, the certified fertilizers. And when it comes to the issue of extension, you all understand what I'm talking about, the extension challenge. Most of the African continents, you realize that the extension ratio is at times 1 to 1,500 households in a country like Uganda, for example, where I come from. So achieving, production and productivity becomes a little bit of a challenge with such kind of extension. And this is not only in Uganda, but it's across Africa. Then when it comes to, again, on services, access to financing, most of these public development banks and other financial institutions don't really want to lend to farmers and agriculture because they look at agriculture as a risky business. Then access to mechanization, for example. How many of our smallholder farmers are able to access mechanization? But also when you look at the transaction cost of, for example, a tractor going to the field to just plow 1 acre of land for one smallholder farmer, or maybe 5 acres of land, it is not cost efficient. Then also other issues include insurance. When you look at the insurance packages that are available, agriculture still is not given priority. Then the biggest elephant in the room is the output market, which is the market. Most of our smallholder farmers just go out to the gardens to plant, but they don't really know where to sell. So can we have a system, for example, where we can have contract farming, where farmers are working from the market backwards so that at first you secure a contract, for example, with a floor price, and then you go back and mobilize the farmers to produce to be able to satisfy such kind of contract. I'm happy that, of course, organizations in Rwanda, like the Imbaraga, Ingabo, National Confederation of Cooperatives in Rwanda, and Rwanda Youth in Agribusiness Forum, who are our members from Rwanda, have been part of this journey, and we've been working with them to support them to be able to support their membership.
Great. Elizabeth, so you are involved with different players. You are a farmer yourself. You have this knowledge across Africa or on the challenges that smallholders are going through. Are we in a situation where big players, governments, donors think for farmers and ask them what to do and impose solutions, and we totally, they totally disregard what they can actually bring on board, the traditional knowledge of this practice? So how are we basically faced with that kind of challenge? And speaking of smallholders innovation, is there a particular success story you may want to share with the audience that maybe people can consider replicating and expounding on and learning more from?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, that the focus is more on innovations that are coming out of research. Most of the innovations from farmers, from youth, from women, have not really been given priority that they deserve. But I think the solution to this is to see how we can, first of all, harness the opportunities of farmers' organizations. One as delivery mechanism, as a prayer for an uptake role, and also as a prayer in terms of development of some of these innovations. But also we need to recognize the importance of building ecosystem of partnerships. We need to see partnerships that are mutually benefiting to all the different actors, not only being seen as end users of some of these innovations, but we need to be part and parcel of innovations right from the start up to the end, because we are the key players actually in all these innovations. And then the other issue is there's a lot that has been done in terms of, for example, these innovations. But where is the one-stop center where one can say, if I need to learn about this innovation, then I need to be here. I know Agra is doing a great job with, for example, the deal room, where we are given an opportunity to pitch to the different investors. But can we have, for example, an Africa investment forum where we can bring all these innovations together, and then we bring all these innovators, and we also be able to build their capacity to be able to have investment-ready proposals that can pitch to these investors. As a federation, of course, we don't only do the talking, but we are also into the practice. We have our own farmer-led innovation. For some of you who can Google it, Granary. It's a virtual granary that aggregates farmers for markets. And IDRA is to work as a virtual cooperative, because even managing people is not easy. You learned about this through the COVID situation, where we were not even able to move from our own homes. So we felt like having a virtual aggregation where we can collect data on our farmers, aggregate their demand for inputs, for services, for markets would be ideal. But the most challenging thing is that, like what I had earlier mentioned, with these innovations, we've attracted support from development partners, for example, the World Bank, but we've got less support from our governments, from our researchers, and from other local partners. And this is where we need their support to come on board. Some have even gone to an extent of telling us, you cannot make it. And yet as farmers, we know this is our solution to our own problems. They're even advising us to adopt other innovations from other people. And these innovations are not solutions to our own. So for me, what I think is really important is to see how we can, like I mentioned, build this ecosystem of actors and support some of these farmer-led innovations as solutions to farmer problems.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. The conversation, of course, will continue a little later. Catherine Bledsoe, Director of Policy Innovation at Academia 2063 and Program Director of Marabo Montpellier Panel. And you do obviously work with smallholder farmers. The things that panelists have raised here, especially those really that either farmers or work directly with farmers, how do you, for instance, support African smallholder farmers in terms of really strengthening their homegrown solutions to be able to meet the challenges that they experience? And tell us a bit more about exactly your interventions.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, James. I think we had a really rich discussion so far, heard really important points, and I would like to focus on the importance of good policies and policy innovations as a key enabler of sort of tying all of this together. And I think current global events, be it the war in Ukraine, COVID, rising inflation rates, supply-side shocks, so the overall fragile economic situation have really prompted global efforts to develop and to mainstream new innovative solutions and technologies, and to tackle some of the challenges that we're facing, including making our food systems more resilient, more equitable, improve livelihoods, and also protect and enhance our environment. And this can be partially tackled through policies or policy innovations aimed at agricultural trade, finance, infrastructure development, but crucially also science, technology, and innovation. And because of the urgency of the current situation, that really requires a step change from current methods, and it calls for evidence-based and evidence-guided experimentation to really be able to seize the opportunities of new technologies, but also we need the leadership and the commitment from the highest level of governments. And that brings me to my next point, and to talk a little bit about what we're doing. So as the Malabo Montpellier panel, which I coordinate, we've been looking into the role of policy innovations and institutional innovations to really bring about transformative change in a number of thematic areas and across the continent. And perhaps it's important to say that we define policy innovation as the capacity and the agility to design and to execute policies that respond to emerging but also unresolved development challenges, and that act as an enabler to seize opportunities as contexts and circumstances change. And I think policy innovation within the context of today's session is particularly crucial because while we all know that failed experiments are costly, not just financially, but also politically, but also we need this transformative change to happen fast, and it needs to happen at scale. So we need this transformation to happen to build resilience and to strengthen the capacity, the adaptive capacity of those who are most vulnerable, and that includes smallholder farmers here on the continent. And as the Malabo-Montpellier panel, we work to systematically identify those African countries that have been able to move the needle in certain thematic areas most significantly and also the fastest. And over the past few years, we've published, I think now over 10 reports with over 60 country case studies. And many of them are relevant to today's session, but I picked out a few that I would like to very briefly run through. Not too many, because I know we don't have much time, but just to give a few examples of what I mean with policy innovation. And I have a small cheat sheet here so that I don't get any of the facts wrong. So for example, in Zambia, we have the Zambia Agricultural Research Institute that generates and adapts new agriculture technologies, and that's situated within the Ministry of Agriculture. Here in Rwanda, we have the Rwanda Agriculture Board, of course, which bridges the gaps between research and extension and transforms agriculture into a knowledge-based and technology-driven and market-oriented industry. Morocco has implemented a number of fiscal measures and fiscal innovations to facilitate access to agricultural equipment and technologies. Ethiopia has dedicated programs for skill development, machinery and technology import and hiring services. In South Africa, we've seen investments in education that was brought up earlier as a very crucial factor. So investments in education, improving collaboration between industry and universities, and strengthen the IP environment. And that has really pushed South Africa to develop a very thriving and leading biopharmaceutical and biotechnology sector. And then lastly, Uganda has become sort of a hub of excellence on agricultural R&D. The National Agricultural Research Organization and also universities have become a beacon for advancing food systems and agricultural biotechnology. Just to mention, for example, the incubators at Makerere University. So these are all public sector driven initiatives, strategies and policies that have shown how important policy is in enabling a thriving innovation environment and also work as a bridge between R&D, markets and end users. And with end users, we mean smallholder farmers, of course. And across Africa, we've seen numerous policies that have enabled innovation to develop thriving innovation environments. And I should say that many African countries, if not most, have some sort of innovation plan, strategy, or policy in place, and they may not be as detailed as we would like them to be on food systems transformation or agriculture, but they present a starting point and an important starting point for any stakeholders wishing to engage in that space. And I think it's really crucial that as stakeholders wish to engage, they use these plans, but also existing policy frameworks to start from there. And then a last point, and that was alluded to as well, I think it's really important for Africa to develop its own science, technology, and machinery industry. And that's important because the continent can draw on its own inventiveness, creativity, knowledge, but also to ensure that solutions fit local contexts. And I think the sector can emerge as a combination of tech startups, small enterprises, but also in collaboration with big international organizations or the private sector. And that, of course, means increased investments in PPPs, de-risking investments coming in from the private sector. And perhaps to conclude, I think what is really important, and we've seen that here come different stakeholders and perspectives coming together, we need platforms that allow the exchange between different stakeholders and to ensure that all actors that are involved in the agri-food systems get a say and are involved in developing new solutions and innovations. And that's crucial so that new innovations and technological innovations meet the needs of smallholder farmers and, in fact, the needs of all actors along the agri-food value chain. And on the policy side, we've been doing that through the Malabo-Montpellier Forum, which really brings together senior government representatives from across the continent, but also technical experts and the private sector to exchange on what policy innovations, what institutional frameworks have actually worked, what was successful, what can be replicated, and what can be brought to scale.
Great, thank you, Catherine. If you could very briefly tell us, what has, let's say, the three most pressing challenges that the African smallholder farmer is facing today. What would those ones be?
Well, I think coming back perhaps to within the context of the policy angle, I think what we are finding to develop or to know which policies really can work as enablers, we need better and more data. We need impact evaluations. One thing is to design a policy, but how do you know that it's actually effective and is having the impact that it's desired to be? And perhaps on the data side, what would be really nice to see is to strengthen national capacities to collect data, to report on data. And I think the biennial review by the African Union is a really nice example. It allows countries to collect data, report on it, and actually we've seen that those countries who make the effort and put in the capacity of collecting data, reporting on it, are actually also overall performing better on a number of different indicators. So I think that's something we would like to see.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for the rich introductory remarks. I know they delved into some of the details, but also we are opening up now the floor to the audience. I know there are different players, different people playing important roles in the sector. And we're talking about really food and food security. And obviously we all have an idea or two on how best we can advance this sector. I guess we have a microphone around or two. We'll probably take for the first round, we'll take 3 questions maybe. You just raise your hand so that they can bring the microphone to you. And then we, very briefly, if there's a question, please say to whom you're addressing your question. If there's a contribution, you're also welcome to make a contribution. Okay, by show of hands, one here, the second one there, the third one here. Your name and the organization you represent, and then your question, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Cyril Ugu. I work for IDH. I'm the country director of IDH in Nigeria. And then I work on the program. I'm the head of a industrial cassava program of the organization. So from my experience at the field level, I had thought that one of the key challenges of African agricultural development for the smallholders is lack of access to affordable finance. Here I hear policy issues, I hear about capacity building. Yes, they are good. And then we hear about innovations in technology. But how do you uptake? How does the farmer adopt this if they don't have access to finance, affordable finance? Across Africa, that's one of the major challenges. But I've not heard that amplified here. So my question is, we have 2 farmers on the panel. What's the place of that? I heard somebody mention access to finance is the problem, is the cost. Of course, they all play together because I do know that it becomes a challenge. If there's sufficient finance, it should become affordable. But where it is not there, and it's not there in many African countries I've been to, So what is the place of finance in the innovation we're talking about? Because I do know some organizations are talking about innovative financing mechanisms that could address agricultural development at the smallholder level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Next, we have a hand up there.
Thank you. My name is Mandla Nkomo. I'm with the CGIR's Excellence in Agronomy Initiative. I have a question for my sister Elizabeth around something you said, that there's this challenge of, very minimal extension services available in most African countries. The challenge we have as the CG is that we've done great research on agronomy, for example. It's available. What are we getting wrong in getting that information to you? What could we do better today to make sure that every single farmer of the 25 million that you have access to the latest information on growing all the crops that they wake up and decide to grow? What could we do better? I'm really keen to get your advice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There was a question here. There's a hand here.
Thank you. My name is Milindi.
I'll come back to you,
Sorry,
sir.
I'll hand it to you.
Go ahead.
So my name is Milindi, and I work with an organization known as One Acre Fund here in Rwanda. I think mine is just to emphasize something that Josephine was saying about funding and financing and the need for that. Because really, if you think about innovation, it's an iterative process. It doesn't start and stop. It needs to be continuously happening. We need to be continuously engaging with the farmer, getting information from the farmer and developing. I think a lot of sectors are doing this. IT is doing this. Software companies are constantly taking data from us to improve the service that they need to give to us. So why do we think that this has to be different in agriculture? I think that's where the disconnect happens. And another thing that I just want to point out that Elizabeth was saying about customization and the thing that needs to be happening that's for the particular customer that we want to have that product. I think we talk about smallholder farmers as if they are similar across the board, but I don't think they are. If you're developing technology for smallholder farmer in Uganda, it won't be the same. It won't be specifically the same as smallholder farmer in Rwanda, in Zambia, in South Africa. So I think that iteration and continuously collecting data and customizing it for that local user, I think we can't ignore it because that's oftentimes we see a lot of innovation that's coming that's from an outside area, and it's very difficult to package it for the local user. So that's just what I wanted to add to this esteemed panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Milindi. We have talked of 3 questions, but let's have that was the emphasis. All right.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Getao Tadisa. I'm a senior researcher at
So your name is?
Getao Tadisa,
Okay.
from Academia 2063, based here in Kigali, Rwanda. My question is for Jocelyn. You said that this incentive, the subsidy is creating some sort of problem for innovation because it's just creating disincentive for the seed companies not to really innovate new ideas. Is it because of the subsidies or is it because of the nature of the contract? Because the contract with the government may not be such incentive compatible, and also it should, to me it might be because of the nature of the contract rather than to the subsidy itself. Don't you think that is the case? The second question is for Elizabeth. You raised the issue of this scale-up of the farmers' innovation, which has been, a discussion for long, and it's become a very challenging issue. Don't you think it's because the innovation, do you think that scalable by itself? Those are the things, because in some cases we found that there are a lot of innovations, indigenous technologies that we can, from smallholder, but those are very context specific, and those are very difficult to some extent to scale them into a different context and different places. So how do you see those contextual challenges for scaling these innovations? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do you agree that there's a lady's hand there. Maybe we can make them 5, and then we'll come back to others.
Oh, thank you, and my question is for the ladies. I'm Adi Singavide. I work for the World Benchmarking Alliance, and we produce the Access to Seeds Index, which actually, Victoria, I know you from there. My question is a little bit back on data collection, because that's what we also do, is like trying to get from the private sector data and evidence of what they're doing to reach smallholder farmers, and we use that to identify leading practices and like also how they can improve. So that's what we do. And knowing that there's a problem with data collection usually, especially from the companies where sometimes there's no capacity or resources to like respond. So that's one of the challenges I see. But my question particularly is between Elizabeth and Victoria. How do you communicate between the two of you on like the needs? Because you're representing farmers, how are you speaking to the seed companies? And then how are the seed companies coming back to you to share how they've used this feedback of what farmers actually need? Or is there that kind of communication, and how is that happening? That's my question. Thanks.
You said your question is directed to Elizabeth and who else? Josephine. All right. All right. Thank you so much. We come back to the panel. A couple of very interesting questions. Most of them have been addressed to farmers and people who are directly engaged with farmers. But everybody is welcome to contribute to this discussion. I don't know if you want me to go through quickly. The first one, particularly the first one, was not addressed to anyone in particular. And this was about what's the place of really finance in this whole agri innovation ecosystem. Do you have somebody in particular you want to take that on? The farmers as well. Right. There was, of course, Mantwa asked about issues to do. He's saying, what are we getting wrong in getting the latest information to farmers? And that was addressed to Elizabeth as well. And then Mirindi made very important contributions about customization. He did emphasize on funding as well. A colleague here from academia did talk about subsidies and address it to Josephine. And then, of course, we have a contribution from Ingabide, who is talking about also issues of feedback from farmers, to have that two-way kind of communication. And then the issues also about scale up and context. Please, you're welcome. You want to go first? Sure.
Yeah, thank you, James. I request that I go first so that I can step out for another panel.
Sure.
Yeah, so thank you very much, colleagues, for your questions. I would like to start with the one on access to finance that was raised from a friend from the Cassava program. One challenge that we've seen as to why access to financing is a challenge for smallholder farmers is because we are not doing agriculture as a business. I think that is the biggest challenge. If we don't recognize ourselves as private sector actors, we shall never have access to financing. And what we are doing as smallholder farmers is just to move away from just producing for subsistence to producing for markets. And by doing that, like I had mentioned, is to work from the market backward. So that if you secure a contract, for example, I'll tell you that we are working with Export Trade Group, where we are supplying them with maize and soybean for Kenya. And other countries like in Uganda, we are even working with Victoria Seeds to supply us with the seed. So what we do is that once you secure that contract, then you're able to work backward with your farmers to be able to produce to satisfy that contract. And you can use that contract as security to be able to have access to financing. For example, with that partnership, we've been able to work with Vision Fund to be able to work with Vision Fund to support our farmers to have access to financing. We've also been able to work with Equity Bank to be able to have our farmers have access to financing. So as long as we are still working in a subsistence way where we are just producing for consumption, we are not sure whether we are even producing for markets or whether we have ready market, then there is no any financial service provider that is ready to put their money at risk. Because we need to understand that these public banks are in business. And even if you are the one, when you're approached by someone to lend them money, you have to first vet whether they are able to pay you back. So if they are not able to pay you back, you can't risk your money. And the same thing with this bank. So we have to up our game as smallholder farmers and begin looking at agriculture as a business. The second question on agronomy and the challenge with extension. I'm happy that now everyone is recognizing the importance of working as partners. Because initially, what has been a challenge is that most of these CGR and research organizations have been working in silos. As farmers, yes, we know quite often you've been having a number of innovations, but these innovations, most of the times, they end at your shelves. They don't reach us. Even when you try to pilot them, you end at piloting, you don't scale them. But I'm happy that everyone now is recognizing the importance of working together and see how we can together come up with a solution. And the solution is, I've mentioned that we are becoming innovative, where we as smallholder farmers, we are also building databases of our smallholder farmers to know where they are, the size of their land, the crop they are growing, so that with that information, it can also help us in terms of decision making, in terms of understanding their, for example, input requirements, in terms of understanding the market that is needed for their production. But also we need to tap into the opportunity of the, for example, the mobile penetration. We know that over 70% of our households now at least have mobile phones. So how do we tap into that opportunity to use it as an extension mechanism where we are able to have a mix of both physical and virtual extension? We are doing this, and we also have a resource center, for example, where our farmers are able to call and report any challenges on their field, and our agronomists are able to offer them the extension support that they need. But of course, like you're saying, 25 million smallholder farmers is a big constituency, or even more than that, when we talk of the populations of our countries. And yet we need to be as inclusive as possible, making sure that everyone is brought on board. So this is where we need to work together in a holistic approach to make sure that some of these successful innovations are put to scale to be able to service a wider platform. The other question was on the context specific in terms of scale up. Yes, I agree with you. Of course, innovations are not a one-size-fits-all. There are innovations that will work in a different environment and might not work in another environment. I'll tell you, for example, we've been collecting data on our farmers, but there are different policies that also guide data. I'll give you an example, like for example, in Kenya and Uganda, when it comes to issues of data, it's a free economy. You can keep your data anywhere. But it's not the same case with here, for example, in Rwanda. If you're working with farmers in Rwanda, all the data on the farmers has to be kept here, and it's a national policy. So you need to understand all those dynamics and see how you can really work around those lines to be able to make sure that whatever you're going to scale is within the policy environment of specific countries, or you consider the specific environments that you're working with. Then the other issue is on how do we communicate, especially we as smallholder farmers, and also other players, like for example the Victoria Seed Company. I think Josephine will tell you that every time they innovate, they have to first pilot those innovations. And to pilot, that is why I mentioned that as farmers, we have a key role to play in terms of the delivery of these innovations, in terms of the uptake of these innovations, but also in terms of scaling of these innovations. So we have to work together. There's no way Josephine is going to succeed without the farmers. And there is also no way we as farmers, we are going to increase our production and productivity without quality seeds from Victoria Seeds. So we've been talking, yes, of course, with challenges here and there, but I can say we've been talking, and some of the challenges that exist have always been mitigated, amongst ourselves. We have a feedback mechanism where we, for example, we meet. I can get my phone and call Josephine, for example, in case we have we get, in case our farmers get orders from their company and maybe the germination rate is not what is indicated on the packages, we've always raised those issues. And as companies, they've always listened and also, where possible, send apologies to us or inform us of the next steps that they are taking to rectify some of those challenges. Thank you.
Josephine, thank you so much. Elizabeth?
Well, I think I'll answer the two questions, then also comment on the cost, is it cost of finance issue. So the first one is about you asked whether is it the subsidy that negatively impacts innovation, or is it the nature of the contract? Now, I think I mentioned during the inception that in the beginning it was about getting high-yielding varieties to the farmers to help them improve their yield. But because of the global challenges we see in terms of cost of fertilizer, severe weather events, invasive pests, governments feel they have a role to make their people food secure. So because of that, they buy lots of seeds, which is good business for us. And I do not know if I'm a government, how better I can do it, but normally they cannot be running small contracts every time. So in most cases, they do the 3-4 year framework contract. So when the CGIR or CIMID comes with a variety that is tolerant to the fall armyworm, I'll only look at it because it's not in the framework contract. So it's partially to do with the framework contract, but we are demotivated also, or we are not inspired to work harder, because if I'm selling all to government and they're giving it to the farmer, why should I bother to invest in putting all the demos and organizing farmer field days? So it works as a disincentive. So to me, the solution is there has to be some kind of business development services that supports the private sector to continue to innovate despite the fact that they are selling to government, because it's a matter of food security, and I understand that it's important that the others subsidize fertilizer or they subsidize seed, and for the case of Uganda, they're even subsidizing crop insurance. So all of that, but at the end of the day, what we are interested in is getting that technology to the farmer. So if the subsidy will help the farmer reach their optimum potential, they can have fertilizer plus the seed or other crop protection products like they're doing now, to me, it's the way to go. But we need business development services so we continue to innovate. But all of it, as I mentioned, there is a cloud of cost of finance that slows us down and stops us from running as fast as we want. The second one from Alice, nice to meet you. Yes, access to seed index is very interesting to all of us. You mentioned that there is a challenge of data collection. I think access to seed index is great. It motivates us to work harder. We show that ranking. We are able to demonstrate that we are on the ground. But the challenge is, Alice, if I walk to a commercial bank and show that access to seed index, Will I get my credit rating better? The answer is no. If I'm trying to tender with either government, will my credit rating get better? No. Even when I go to the East African Business Council, nobody knows about it. If I ask my sister access to seed index, she will just stare at me because it's not very significant. So our challenge, why there is a bit of relaxation, it's a great idea, it's a great way of promoting companies, but actual value, bringing money in our pockets, it's not there. So I think access to seed index has to engage with the regional bodies, whether it's ECOWAS, EAC, COMESA, and try to use that to bring tangible impact so that when the Farmers Federation is making decisions, they rush to the access to seed index. When the East African Business Council has to decide, they rush to the access to seed index. So I think that is my response. But in terms of communication, if it's any comfort, Uganda Seed Trade Association is housed by Uganda Farmers Federation. So we sit in the same complex. So normally we kind of try to address challenges together. I don't know whether that is communication. So if we have those issues like the African armyworm came and the farmers their crops were decimated and yet they couldn't get crop protection products. So as companies, we work with them, and I think we are almost like one. I don't know if you want some other formal comment, but we work so closely. We talk to our parent ministry together. We try to get policies. We had issues of quality declared seed. We tackled it as a team. So we normally tackle it as a team. So that is it. Then I don't want to end without mentioning that cost of finance. I think my introduction was the cost of finance is a cloud that slows us as business. To me, financing needs an overhaul. And it's from like the regulator, the central banks of the continent. I'll tell you, this is now, there is climate change, and this is a central bank that regulates banks who, as my sister says, are lending for 90 days, 120 days, 180 days, even 1 year. It sounds ludicrous. The agriculture, the entire value chain from primary production, then research and development, then primary production, then value addition. The whole chain should be supported. And to me, if we do not understand that, that is why I'm saying the people who assess the bank's risk need to be different. But overall, the central banks need also to sit at the whole of Africa and get patient capital. For any agriculture business, it shouldn't be less than 3 years. So to me, that would make a difference. But the other thing is, my government of Uganda is paying crop insurance. Believe you me, every bank I go to, they do not want to take that crop insurance from government to de-risk me. If it is 16%, they bring it to 8%. They don't want. So it needs like a bigger push, policy level with development partners who are here, or at a very high level at African Development Bank, and also the development banks like in Uganda. It's just a commercial bank that calls itself a development bank. So there are many, many things, but the whole structure, if we could get the central banks together, and they should be able to rethink post-COVID, post-climate change, and the new emerging global risk, especially soil nutrition is not a joke. When the price of fertilizer is double, why would a farmer invest in a seed when they know they will not get quality output? In fact, some of them now, I'm telling them, go back to OPV. But it pains me, but better tell them the truth. Because I said, if you cannot afford fertilizer for the hybrid that is going to give you 9.5 tons, then grow your OPV, which is less than half of that. So those are the real challenges. But the saddest thing, my brother, is when a foreign company borrows at under 1%, They sit in Uganda, compete with me, and I'm struggling to borrow at 16%. What are the chances that I'll ever compete with that foreign company? So it's a bigger problem than just us trying to discuss it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josephine. And Elizabeth, I know you have another engagement. I think we'll allow you to leave when you want to leave. But before we proceed to the next round, maybe final round, if you allow. Quickly, Catherine, you at the policy level, the issue of funding, is there something that you do to support countries' governments? Thank you so much, Elizabeth. A round of applause for Elizabeth, please. So, Catherine, from your perspective, if there's anything that you're doing in that context of funding, in terms of policy, it's one thing to set up institutions, Rwanda Agriculture Board, Uganda, something, but then at the end of the day, if the challenges are not being addressed, there's a problem, obviously. So at a policy level, if you could also say, something around that issue of access to funding or cost of funding, if you like, and of course, definitely Joe as well, the issue of de-risking. Is there something particular that you do in that area? Is there something positive? Is there something in the pipeline along those lines as well? And then finally, Mr. Kwamu, research. Somebody talked about customization, that our smallholder farmers are not the same. They have different challenges, they have different realities. Our universities, our research institutions in position to really develop homegrown research that applies to that resonates with our local context, especially in the context that we're in today of Ukraine and Russia issues and raising cost of living. Relying on foreign knowledge is increasingly going to be problematic. Maybe you can start with you, Catherine, then Joe, and then Adipala.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the issue of funding is a recurring theme whenever we look into developing our reports on different thematic areas. And a few years ago, we did a report looking at digital agriculture and looked at sort of innovative solutions using digital technologies for improving easier access to finance. We're currently working on a report that is being published at the end of this year that looks at how to leverage climate adaptation finance for food systems transformation. So how can we leverage the funding that is available in the climate space, specifically adaptation finance for the benefit of smallholder farmers. So I wish we were having these conversations in a few months' time. I could tell you a lot more. But I'd also like to comment on one other point, if I may, and that's, I think it was raised by the gentleman from the 1 Acre Fund, the importance of context-specific solutions, be it machineries or technologies, and I would absolutely echo the importance of that, and also want to flag that this has additional benefits and opportunities, right? So if you grow a local context-specific machinery and technology industry, not only do you develop solutions that are fit for purpose and fit context, but you also create important employment opportunities in rural areas, and you can spark an agri-processing sector, which in turn then brings in value addition and more benefits to farmers and other value chain actors.
Joe, thank you. Catherine?
This has been an excellent discussion about where innovation lies. And I want to go back to the fundamental problem we're trying to fix is that the crop innovation pipeline is broken today for delivering products to smallholder farmers.
Your mic, Joe, your mic.
What's that?
Your mic. Use the mic, please.
Okay. Sorry. As a result of this particular situation, we're observing that yields are significantly subpar. So in sub-Saharan Africa, where we see African producers are yielding at half the expected yield as a result of fall armyworm, for example. We've seen a flat line relative to cassava production, in large part because the technology and the innovations that are coming out of the research labs are not reaching those markets. The added pressure of climate is going to make this even more significant over time. And we can look at innovation across multiple temporal time dimensions, and there are incremental steps, and then there are breakthroughs that actually have to occur in this space. And the traditional approaches that we've been pursuing over the last several decades are not delivering those breakthrough innovations that are more important now than ever. We know that economic growth is 11 times more efficient when it's delivered through the agricultural sector than any other of the business sectors. So it's a win-win for all of us to actually be driving those type of step change innovations. It's clear we need a new model in this space, and I didn't speak about this earlier, but I'll touch on it now. From a Gates Ag 1 perspective, it's our aspiration that Gates Ag 1 can come in as a purpose-driven catalyst that has a mission from a nonprofit perspective that provides agility and acting as a startup accelerator. Our goal is to de-risk the development of innovations for smallholders. That's the bottleneck. It's hard for the private sector to invest in markets that may not be business as business rich as they would prefer. And there are also other complications as it relates to developing the technology. To this end, we'll be investing long-term patient capital to translate scientific breakthroughs into products that will improve productivity, livelihoods, and climate resilience. Our initial flagship portfolio, now getting to the specific examples, will be things like photosynthesis, where we know that there are significant gains that can be made in productivity. And if we don't start executing those now, smallholder farmers are not going to see the benefits of those technologies in the near future. The second area where we're working is on nutrient symbiosis, or said another way, self-fertilizing plants. That has a productivity gain play, a sustainability a benefit, as well as it enables farmers to actually produce more grain on a per hectare basis. And this can only be accomplished, as demonstrated by this forum up here, through collaboration. And the walls actually have to come down between different organizations to actually align around being able to deliver those innovations. It's our pledge to actually work across the public and private sector, academic universities, national agricultural research facilities, and the farm extension systems. Our conviction is that all lives have equal value, and this means that we believe that smallholders should also have equal access to the world's discoveries and developments. And farmers know what they need, but what farmers don't know is what's the potential, especially as we're living now in an age from a scientific perspective where biology, engineering, and physics are intersecting. And we're committed to actually ensuring that those technologies will reach the smallholder farmers.
Thank you so much, Joe Adipala. And I'm being informed that we've already exceeded our time. So our conversation will continue after this panel going forward. Adipala.
Thank you. In terms of research, clearly we have a very varied continent. Even within the same country, there are a lot of really variations. What is critical in whatever intervention that we need to do, we need to work towards co-creation. That means we need to work with different varied stakeholder groups when we are designing programs. For the research, I think we need to put more emphasis on participatory action research, such that the beneficiary, the potential beneficiaries, are part of the research that we are working on, such that we are already creating an uptake pathway for adapting the technologies that we are doing. But equally important is that while you have context-specific issues at country level, we know that some of the issues are not restricted to one country, they cut across countries. We have sub-regional organizations in the continent. You have the Asarekas, you have the Kadesa, Koraf. Let us strengthen those institutions to enable us to move technologies across the continent. Recently, we did a study on ongoing effort to develop climate-smart innovations. And there's a lot already being done by those regional bodies. What we need to do is to strengthen the capacity to make sure these technologies go beyond where they're being tested. Importantly, Africa, we must build the research capacity. There are going to be new, current, and other emerging challenges. We need to build the response capacity such that we are able to deal with those cases as they emerge. To do that, African leaders must put their mouth or their money where their mouth is.
Thank you so much, very much, Adeparo. On that note, we've come to the close of our discussion, of our panel, but the discussion continues. I want to thank you so much, the audience. I want to thank you, dear panelists, for the insightful ideas and insights shared here. We request that the conversation continues, of course, beyond this evening. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your sessions here. Thank you. All right, sorry. I've just been reminded that we, again, have to now complete circle, closing session, closing remarks by the Region Director, Eastern Southern African Division, International Fund for Agriculture Development, and Commissioner on the Commission of Sustainable Agriculture Intensification, Sarah Bogao Bunu. You're welcome. Thank you so much. Yes, either way. The microphone.
Fellow participants, it's really been very exciting. I know that we have already passed the time, so I shall not take too much time. No, it's really been an honor to participate in this very rich discussion. I think I personally learned a lot from all the distinguished panelists. So I just want to thank you, James, Josephine, Catherine, Ikwamu, and Joe, and Elizabeth, of course, in absentia, for this rich discussion. And I think it was very deep, and it's very important, some of the critical recommendations that have come out for food systems going forward. And as James has said, this is the beginning of the conversation. And I think it's really poignant as well that we have here myself, as IFAD, Gates Agwan, USDA, USAID, the World Farmers Forum, Reform, IFDC, and Malabo Monteplemier panel as part of that conversation, because I think this is really key. I'm asking all of you here who've participated here to commit post-EGRF discussions to bring together an investment portfolio that has African smallholders at its center. And I think this is what we take away as a very first step in designing and thinking along where the innovations should come from. I'm happy to host and even champion this. I'm sure the Gates Foundation is, and others as well, to take this particular conversation forward. But as we come together post-AGRF, there are a number of aspects that we consider within the innovation pipeline, which is fragmented. And I think that's the second key point I want to raise here, that fragmentation. really has to stop. So we need to do a couple of things, and I just want to summarize, and I won't be able to touch on everything that you raised. But we know that innovation is not a linear process. It is actually a circular motion that is iterative. And we've heard a lot from all of you, and I think getting and mapping out those 17 steps is part of that process. We also know financing innovation in agriculture is very, very important, and trying to put performance-based systems and incentives for seed companies and other private companies and public actors who are in the innovation space to actually produce innovations that count, that matter at scale. The third takeaway that I really took away from here is that even though there is finance, we're sitting on lots of funds, from pension funds to capital markets, equity markets. The finance is there. How do we unlock it? So we've got to be able to cost these innovations. What do they look like? What is the actual true cost of innovation? And bringing about sustainability. Where is that? Right now, the COSAI Commission that you mentioned actually did a study, and we know that the Global South is investing about 60 billion, but only a very marginal percent of that, 4.3, of agriculture GDP is actually looking at non-economic returns. So it's not looking at environmental benefits, and it's actually also not looking at social returns. So that question on equity remains out of the scope. And in order to bring it back together, as we've discussed here, we really need to change how we are doing it. Now, it's not only about, so the quantity, we know we need billions more dollars, but it's also in the quality. And we really hope that out of the 60 billion that is invested, we want to at least increase that double-fold to get an 8% return in those investments. We need to come together. We've already heard about that. That's the fourth point, in order to have a balanced food system in the future with equity. But I also think something that was really important that came out to us was the policy side of things. And there are policies that are working, but if we don't have the data and the evidence to demonstrate that they are, then we're not doing ourselves a service. And I think all those rich examples that Katrina contribute, that's the tissue and the architecture that already exists. We can build on that. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's look at those structures, those mechanisms, those vehicles, and see how we can invest in them to actually increase that. And so as we try to fix the fragmentation, we also must fix the focus, investing in ensuring the future agro-food systems of Africa are productive, profitable for smallholder farmers, equitable to ensure women and youth are beneficiaries of this, and that the transformation that we're talking about is actually going to be able to make a positive contribution to our future, even in terms of climate gains. So we really need to look at food systems, value chains, and look at where those disconnects happen as we bring about and invest in innovations. So with that, I'd really like to thank you and also thank and close the session, but I know this is just the best foundation to kick off this discussion. Thank you very much, and let's please give them a second round of applause.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening.